Hi, so this is the materials I'm going to be using for this bag, and this is eyelets. This is what it looks like, the flat and the major body of the eyelet. This is a bag seat that a bag sits on. This is a chain for the handle of the bag. This is a zipper pull to pull the zip that we'll be putting on the bag, and then this is a lock. Okay, so this is how this works, and then you lock your bag and you can remove it. So this is how this looks. Okay, so this is the needle that I'll be using. This is size 22 needle. You can see clearly this is size 22 needle, and that is what I am going to be using to make the bag. Size 22 needle. This is a brush for our gum. This is the container that we're going to be putting the gum. This is the gum itself, because we cannot take the gum directly from here, so we just put it in a container to do it. So these are the fabrics I'm going to be using for this bag. So this is an Ankara fabric. I'm going to beg Ankara again, as usual. So this is an Ankara fabric. I'm not going to be using much of that. And this is half yard of a pink leather. Of course, I'm going to be using this to interface the bag. First, I saw a book that I liked the size, so I said, let me replicate the size of the bag. So I measured the book, and it was 9 inches in width and 6 inches in height. So I measured that, and I had to cut it out on the interface. So that's 9 inches. Just measure 9 inches. So you can use any size for your bag. Once you know the width and the height, you can do this for any size. So it could not, yours may not be 9 by 6 like in this case. Yours could be something else. But I already showed you how I got my measurements. I identified a book that I liked the size, and I measured it, and I'm making a bag using the same measurements. So this is 9 inches. The leather is not straight, so I was trying to correct it so I don't get something that is not straight. So I had to make sure that the lines were straight. So I'm making use of, let's call this a ruler. And so I'd measured 9 inches before, and this is 6 inches. So I'm just going to mark out the 6 inches from the line and draw a straight line. Then from the other 6 inches as well, I'll measure another 6 inches and draw the line too. So I'll cut that out. So that's me trimming the excesses. You just want to be very sure that the only thing that you have is the exact thing that you need, no extra. So you have to trim off anything that is outside your line. And so this is me dividing the two. So this is for the front and for the back of the bag. And I'll be using the cover of a bottle to shape the bottom of the bag. Then I'll be measuring half inch, that's a quarter inch, and that's what I'll be measuring at the top of the body of the bag. Then I'll draw the line from that to meet the curve I made at the bottom. You may decide not to slant just like this, but most times I love to slant my bag. You can slant, and you may decide not to slant, and you can also use more than quarter inch to slant. Depends on how slanted you want your bag to be. Whichever way, you can experiment with these things so that you see how it plays out and in the end product of your bag. Okay, so the front and the back, I'm placing the front on the back just so I can get exactly the same thing by the time I'm done. So instead of using the front to cut the back, I'll just, follow the same process I used on the front and apply it to the back. Then quarter inch at the top, and then I'll slant. Okay, so be sure that the front and the back they are equal and the same. So once you're sure about that, that there's no more need to trim anything, you can then go ahead and cut for the flap of the bag. Okay, so this is me trying to make straight the line again, the 9 inches line. And so this is, I'll measure where I want to the flap of my bag to get to, and I'll also measure where I want it to connect it at the back, which is 2 inches. So I want 3.5 for the front, 2 inches for the back, and I want to use 2.5 for the top of the bag. So I'll calculate all that together, and that gave me 8. That's 3.5 for the flap, 2.5 for the top, and 2 inches for the back. So I've measured out 8 by 9 inches, and that is what I've just cut out here. 8 by 9 inches. So that's what is going to be the flap of the bag. So in case you don't know what a flap is, that's like the cover of the bag. It's going to come from the back to the front. Okay, so that's 8 by 9 inches. And I'm going to measure out the flap, the line for the flap. So that's 3.5 line. I'm going to roll that out so that I can know where my flap starts from, and I can use it to shape the flap of the bag. Then the top is 2.5, so I'm measuring that out as well, and I'll draw the line so that it's obvious. It will not be an imaginary line, it's something I can see. And if we measure the back, that's going to be 2 inches. Okay, so based on the slant I give my bag, I use 1/4 inch. So that 1/4 inch, I'm going to measure it out on the line that I drew for the flap and for the top, and I'm going to connect the line to the back. I'm not going to connect it to the flap. So this is the 1/4 inch line that I used to slant my bag, which means that if you used more than 1/4 inch to slant your bag, that's what you're going to measure out here. And if you didn't slant your bag at all, you may not need to measure out any line here. Okay, so I'll place either the front or the back of my bag, and I'll place it on that line. Since it is the same measurement I used to slant, so the two edges will fall on the two lines I drew, and I'm going to mark the side out of the bag. So I'm just going to draw out the shape of the front of the bag on the flap, and I'll cut that out. Okay, so on the back of the bag, I'm going to measure 1 inch. So I'm going to measure 1 inch and slant it out. So this is to enable me connect it to the back of the bag. You understand this once you are sewing. So I just use 1 inch to slant it in at the back. So this is what my flap looks like, the front and the back. So now it's time to cut the side of the bag, and I'm going to measure this round. I'm going to measure this round, and whatever it gives me, I'm going to minus ½ inch and draw a line by 3 inches. So that's what I'll cut out here. This is 19.5 by 3 inches that I just cut out. I couldn't get that on camera, sorry. For the zip holder of the bag, I'm going to measure the height of the bag that we have now and remove 2 inches from it. So that gave us 6. And I'm going to cut out 6 by 1.5 in 2 places. So that's going to be what we hold the zip of the bag. You may decide not to put a zip in your bag once it has a flap, and just in case you want to put zip in the bag, there is no problem about that. The bag lock is already a security on its own that can hold your bag firm, but you can still decide to put zip on the bag. So here I'm measuring out 6 inches, which is the height of the bag, the length of the height of the bag minus minus 2 inches. And the 1.5 inches I'm measuring is because I just want the whole thing to be 1 inch, and I'm going to use the ½ inch as a sewing allowance. So that's why we have 1.5 here. So you can experiment with this as well. You can, depending on the size of your bag and the height of the bag, you can have different things. So this is the Ankara I'm going to be using to cover this bag. So this is going to be the bag fabric, and I'll be using the interface I've got to cut out the Ankara. So you can use any material for this. You can use your chinos, velvet, whatever it is. You may not use Ankara. So I'm going to ensure that I leave 0.5 inch, at least 0.5 inch allowance all around the bag. So I'm leaving allowance all around the back because I'll still need to fold it, and I need to use those extra allowance to fold it. So this is the 19.5 by 3 inches that I'd cut. Remember that it may not be the same for yours. Just measure your bag from first side to the bottom, then to the second side. You're not going to be measuring the top alongside it, and whatever figure you get, you remove 0.5 inch from it, and that's going to be the side of your bag. So this is the side of my bag. It's 19.5 by 3 inches, and I've cut the fabric for it. So for the zip holder as well, I'm going to be using this Ankara fabric. So I've doubled it that way. I've doubled the Ankara so that I can cut it at once, and I'm going to leave allowance for it at the two sides. Okay, so I'm going to leave allowance at the two sides. My sewing allowance is already on this. It's already on the interface itself, so I may not cut a folding allowance for it except from on the two sides. So this is the faux leather that I'll be using for this bag, and first thing I'm going to be cutting out from it is the cover of my bag, the flap. So I'm using the same strategy I used to have a curved edge. So I wanted a curved edge. You can make it more curved, and you can use a different shape. You can decide to use V shape, envelope shape, you can use pentagon, you can use any shape for your flap. You can get creative around it, not necessarily the round I used here. So get creative with your flap. Just ensure that it does not pass the line of the flap, and you can draw any shape that you want with it. So just experiment with this, get creative around it. So I'd cut the leather for my flap, and I'm going to double that. I'm going to double that leather. So exactly the one that I've cut, that I've given allowance, is the one I'm using to cut again. So I do not need to leave extra allowance again, since there's already allowance on this one. And you may decide not to use leather for your flap cover. You can use Ankara as well. The same Ankara that you use, you can use it. You can use a different material. Does not necessarily have to be that you have to use leather for the flap of your bag. For the lining of the bag, the top side of the front and the back, I want it to be leather. So I'm just going to measure 1 inch. I want it to be 1 inch then before the actual lining. So I'm just going to measure that out and use the front to cut it and leave allowance at the sides, because I'm still going to sew the lining as well. And whatever it is that I had cut, I'm going to double that, because the front and the back, I want their lining at the top to be a leather. Then this is the lining that I'm going to be using for this bag. I don't know what the name of this material is, but I begged it for the pieces as well from the tailor shop, and she had given it to me. So that's what I'm using for the lining of the bag. Okay, so first I'm cutting the lining for the side of the bag. Okay, so you're going to leave allowance as well on the sides, because you're going to sew. And so I'm not going to start this from the top, because I'd already cut an interface leather for the top of the lining. So I'm just going to cut for the bottom side of it again. So that's why you can see 1 inch. I'm leaving 1 inch allowance at the top, because I'd already cut leather for that aspect. You will see how this plays out once we start making the bag. And so that's for the front of the bag, and for the back as well. So I'm just going to cut again. So instead of shifting it up and making allowance, I just did not leave an extra allowance for this bag, because it's already in the bag itself. But what we are actually cutting is the lining for the bag, and it has to be the same as the interface that you cut. So it's because I'm putting leather at the top here, you don't let it get confusing. So this is the period time where we gum everything together. So first, on the Ankara fabric for the side, I'm going to be applying gum on the wrong side of the Ankara. So that's where you put the gum. So you spray the gum on the Ankara, and as well as on the interface for the Ankara. So you can use any side. You can use any side of the leather. So you can gum any side. Then the second one, So I just checked for the wrong and the front side, and I'm going to be applying gum on the wrong side of the Ankara. I'm going to wait for it to dry up. So for the zip holder as well, so I'm going to apply gum on that too, as well as on the Ankara, and I'm going to set them aside for it to get dried. So the gum I'm using here, sorry I didn't state earlier, is OCI gum mixed with energy. So if you get OCI gum, you're good. If you get energy, you're good. So these are the two gums that I know about that I use. You may get something else. As far as it can go, you're good to go. Okay, so next thing I'm going to be applying gum on is the side of the bag, just to avoid spilling gum on the table, because gum can really mess up your table. That's why I'm doing this on the leather. You can see that I have a leather underneath what I am gumming. You don't want to mess up your table, so just put a leather underneath and then you apply your gum. Okay, so this is for you to help you manage the things you have at home to make bags. Then the Ankara for the side, spray gum on the wrong side as well. I'm going to set it aside for it to get dried up. So the ones that I've done before that I've dried, so I'm just going to put them together. So that's the interface and the fabric, and I'm going to smoothen it out. And in order to fold, I'm going to apply gum on the edges, so both on the edges of the interface and on the edges of the Ankara. I'm going to be putting gum on that so that I can fold. So I'll set it apart so that it can dry, and I'll gum the other ones and do the same. For the zip holders, I'm going to put that on each other as well, then cover the leather. The Ankara already has gum, just make sure that the gum are applied to the edges. So ensure that there are spaces on the two edges, the two sides, because you will need to fold that. So as you are gumming, ensure that you still have your space, the allowance you left, you still have them intact. And so for the gusset of the bag, the side, I'm going to gum that as well. So please ensure you retain the allowance you have on the sides of the bag. Don't let them disappear as you are gumming. You left allowance while you were cutting, and as you're applying, ensure that they don't disappear. Let there be spaces on the sides where you want them to be in order for you to be able to fold your bag. Okay, so I'm going to apply gum on the edges of this as well to enable me fold. On the flap of the bag, I'm just going to gum one side. So I'm just going to apply gum on one of the fabric I cut for it and on the interface itself. Then I'm going to take these ones that I've interfaced and I'm going to fold them. So you want to fold on the edges, and on the rounded side you want to ensure that you pleat so that the shape is maintained. You still want it to be rounded. Then on the corners you have to pleat as well. So you may have an A-shaped pleating at the corners, and on the rounded side you may have a pleat. You may drape it so that the shape is maintained, the round shape is maintained. And you cut out the excesses. The pleated fabrics, you just cut that out, make it, flatten it out. Okay, so do this for all the things that you're going to be folding. So you fold on the edge, ensure that it is firm. Please, as you're folding, ensure that it is very firm, it's not loose. And at your corners, ensure that you have an A-shaped pleat. And on the rounded side, ensure that you pleat it very well to ensure that the shape comes out. The shape of the interface is maintained, and cut out the excesses. For the zip holder, just fold on the sides, fold on the sides, and then bring the Ankara on it to cover it up. And that's all for this. Fold on these two sides and make the Ankara to slip to cover up the exposed part. And that's all for this. So we have our zip holder. So for the um flap, for the flap of the bag, I'm just going to overlay that, interface it as well, and that's all. So we'll not be gumming the second one now until much later. And smoothing it out, ensure that what you gummed is smooth. So for the side of the bag, we are going to fold that as well. So you fold all round. I'm going to take the front of the bag and I'm going to fold it into two equal sides so I can get the middle. Then I'm going to measure 2.5 inch from there. That's where the lock is going to be, so that we have 1 inch left at this bottom side. And I'm going to take one of the lock and I'm going to measure it and divide it into two, so I'll know where it's supposed to be on the bag. So I'll mark that out and I would pierce that part. So I'll pierce that part and I'll use it to mark where it's supposed to be on the other end as well. So I use the scissors to pierce that as well, and I'm going to go in with the lock. So this is the side of the lock that is going to be on the front side of the bag, not the other one. Okay, so I'll flatten it at the back and that holds the lock in place. So I'm going to apply gum on it and cover it up. I'm going to cover up the metallic part so that the person using the bag would not get injured from the metal, because people just blindly put ends into their bag and you want to ensure the safety of your customer. So I'm going to ensure that that is flattened out on it. Then on the flap as well, I'm going to fold it into two to get the middle as well, so I'll know where the lock is going to be. And I'm going to mark out where the lock is going to be by straightening the front on the flap of the bag. And I'll just mark that and bring in the other side of the lock and mark it based on the middle that I have measured. Okay, so ignore any line you may see on it before. That was a mistake. Just follow this new one that I'm explaining. In order to fix the eyelet, I'm going to look for the middle of the flap. So that's 4 inch on each side. And I'm going to use 1.5 inch. So I want to leave 3 inches on the middle. And I'm going to go with 3/4 inch on the side. So that's where my eyelets are going to be. Then I want to mark out the middle of the top of the bag. So that's 2.5 divided by 1, that's 1.25. So I'll mark that out, and based on the lines I've drawn before, on the middle line of the top that I just drew, that's where I'm going to mark the eyelet. And the wing of the eyelet is going to fall on the marking that I've done, the 3/4 marking, and then of course the 1.5 from the middle that I marked first. So you can decide on your own, you can decide on the allowance you want to do based on the size of your bag. You just want it to be equally distributed, and you want there to be more space in the middle, because that's where the person is going to put in beneath their shoulders. So you want there to be space. You don't want your chain coming from where it should be under the shoulder of your customer or for the person carrying the bag. So the face of the eyelet, so instead of using a puncher, of which I would have used if I were to be making a bag for a more advanced class, so I'm using scissors to mark that out, okay, so that you can use things you can find around in order to be able to make the bags. So I'm improvising for a lot of things in this bag video. So I'll find the middle of the side of the bag and I'll mark that out, and I'll measure the base of the bag, which is 9 inches. The base is 9 inches. I'll mark where 9 inches gets to, and then I'll decide on where I want my lock to be, of which I prefer 3, that's 6 inches apart. 6 inches apart is just going to be underneath the bag. It's not going to get to the edge of the bag. So depending on the size of your bag, you want to know where your bag seat or bag bottom would sit. Okay, so for this bag is 9 inches and I want 6 inches so that it doesn't get to the edge. Can you see? Then I'm going to mark 2 centimeter from each end. 2 centimeter, not 2 inches please, 2 centimeter from each end. That's like 0.75, 3/4. So, and I'm going to mark that, and that's where the bag seat is going to enter from. Okay, so just to make the hole, so the bag seat, I'm going to use scissors to pierce it so that it can enter through. So your bag seat is going to come out from the Ankara side, and the wings are going to be on the internal part. So 2 centimeter is what I'm using here because of the width of this bag. If the bag was to be wider than this, if I didn't use 3 inches but I'd use something like 4 inches, I would have used more than 2 centimeter from the sides. The first thing we are going to be sewing is the flap, so I'm going to cover it. So the right side of the bag fabric to the right side, and I'm going to sew on the edges of the interface. So please, when you're sewing on the edges of the interface, and make sure that your sewing is straight and perfect. because we are going to be turning it out, and by the time we turn it out, you don't want to be seeing east and north and Nigerian map. That's just by the way though. Okay, so you trim all the excesses and just leave a little allowance. And so look at it, you can see on the edges of the interface, that's where I sew. And I'm going to cover the interface again with gum, so the gum we were supposed to apply to gum it on the other side earlier. That's what we're just doing now. We had to sew first before we now gum the other part of it. Then I'm going to just cut small out of the edges of the bag, so that when we turn it in, it can slip on each other and not be bulky. So you turn that out easily, please. Don't allow anything to tear. Depends on the strength of the leather you're using. So bring out all the edges, ensure that they come out so well, and then you can now apply gum on the leather or on your or the bag fabric. Okay, so then you flatten it out, ensure that all the sides come out so well. So on the edge, I'm going to apply gum because I'm going to fold this side for neat finishing. Okay, so important to note is that all this gum on the body of the bag, all the gum stains on the body of the bag, you can use either petrol or kerosene with maybe an handkerchief or a soft cloth or even your Ankara to clean it off, because you may not see that in this video. So all the gum stains, you can use kerosene or petrol to clean them off and they will come off. Alright, so I'd fold this on each other. So I'd fold them. I'm just going to top stitch on what I'd already sewn before. So I'm going to be putting oil. When you're sewing leather with your manual machine, you have to apply oil so that it can move. And I'm just going to top stitch on each round. So please ensure you are using a matching thread. In the case of this video, I'm not even using a thread that is matching enough. This is facial pink on baby pink. If I were to be using a matching pink, I would be using a baby pink thread. So please, when you're sewing yours, ensure you're using a matching thread. And then you're going to follow the curves, the corners, everything. Don't just sew straight. Follow all the patterns on the bag to top stitch. And then cut out on the other side all the things you've marked out before. This is where we get to fix the eyelets on the bag. So you just choose where you want to be on the front side of your bag. That should be like the neatest place, and that's where you're going to fix the eyelet from. If the hole is not wide enough, you widen the hole a bit more. You still want to ensure that it's tight though, but then that it allows in the eyelets. And the flat side of it, you cover it up on the other side, and you can use your scissors to press the eyelet. So just press it progressively, and then you make sure that you press it on the flat side. So as you're pressing it, that's you cutting the line highlights on the edges, and then you are pressing it on the flat side. So that's how you're going to fix your eyelet if you don't have the setting tool. Okay, so I'll mark that again and widen the hole and fix the eyelet and do the same thing. So I'm going to use the scissors to cut the edges and flatten it out and press it on the flat side so that it holds down the flat side. And if you have an hammer or you have anything strong enough, not too strong though, so that it doesn't affect the eyelets, you just use it to hit on the eyelets. So because of what you pressed, you don't want it injuring anybody. It's a metal, so you want to flatten it out. So I'm just using the bottom side of my scissors to do that, and it's pretty worked well for me. Can you see the other side of the eyelet? And that's how we're going to fix the other two as well. Now I'm going to be using lighter to burn all the loose threads. So you don't want to use scissors to cut them, you want to use lighter to burn the loose threads. And for the back of the flap, you remember that it was 2 inches we measured for it. So that's where it is going to start from, the 2 inches. And the edges are going to meet with the edges just the same way I pointed out with my finger there. So you're going to sew that to the back of the bag, not the place where you put the lock. The lock is going to be on the front, the flap is going to be joined to the back of the bag. And I'm going to go a second time with that. So I'm just going to move up a bit and go a second time. Here I'm going to be fixing the other side of the lock on the flap. Okay, so when you get your lock, you will know which one will be on the flap and which one will be on the front side of the bag. You will know. Nobody's going to tell you, but you will know. Okay, so then I'm going to press that on. I'm going to fix that and press it. I'm going to use the scissors to press it so that it is firm. So that sorts it for the look of the bag. And can we see what we have here? Our bag is almost set, remains the side. So I'm going to be bringing in the side. I'm going to fold the back side, which is what I'm sewing first, into 2, and I'll mark the middle. So I'll bring the middle close to the middle of the side. So I'm starting the sewing from the middle. Please always start the sewing from the middle, just so that everything can be perfect. And I'm going to sew edge to edge, so the edge of the side to the edge of the body of the bag, and that's how I'm going to sew it, edge to edge, and follow every curves. Okay, so don't go and turn the curve that you had measured there, that you have cut there. Don't go and turn it into 4 corner. Follow the curve as it is. Okay, so then you can now start this from the top, and you're going to start sewing. You're going to double stitch to ensure that it doesn't lose thereafter, and you sew edge to edge, so the edge of the side to the edge of the body of the bag. Then we take the front of the bag as well. We'll fold it into 2 to get the middle, and then we'll start sewing from the middle as well. So the middle of the side to the middle of the front of the bag, And that's where we're going to start sewing from. And we are going to sew edge to edge the same way we sew for the back. Ensure that your edges come to your edges. So even if it means that you may have to cut the side if it is too long, or you can, it's something that you can, fold in and it will not show too much on the bag. So, but ensure that the edge finishes with the edge. Not that the side of your bag is now longer than the body. You may have to cut that and, recut and regum. So edge to edge, you bring it edge to edge as you sew. So I'm using my finger to feel it if the edges are together. So you may want to do that as well. And so that ends the sewing of the body of the bag, and cut out all those threads. So the bag is already forming up now. Can we see? We already have the body of the bag all set. And the next thing to do now is the lining of the bag. So first we're going to start with the zip. We're going to sew the zip holder. So sew it from the side, and then you put the zip. So you tuck in the top of the zip, stitch that, and you sew down. And then you sew the side as well. You do the same thing for the second side of the zip holder. And then you leave allowance before you cut the zip, like 2.5, 3 inches allowance. So you mark it. I found the middle of the holder and I marked that. This is the lining for the body of the bag, so I had already marked the middle as well, and I'm going to place the zip holder on it and put the leather on it as well. So the zip holder is going to be in between the leather and the lining. Then I'm going to top stitch on the leather. So we need to put gum as well. If you're sewing on leather with your manual machine, ensure you put gum so that it can move. I said gum, oil, please, machine oil, so that it can move. So the same thing for the other side. Mark the middle of the lining and put the middle of the zip holder to the middle of the lining. So the right side of the zip holder is going to be the one slipping. It's going to slip on the right side of the lining, but then the wrong side of the leather is what we are going to sew on. So the right side of the zip holder of the zip is going to face up, the right side of the line is going to face up, but the wrong side of the leather is what we're going to sew on first before we turn it and top stitch on it. So having done this, I'm going to shape the body of the lining. So it's going to follow the same shape as the bag. Remember the curve that we had at the bottom of the bag, and then remember the 1/4 inch that we removed from the sides of the bag in order to slant it. So I'm just going to slanting this, and I'm going to do the same for the other side. So I just needed the slant at the top so that it matches with the exact body of the bag. So I'm going to sew the side of the bag. So just the same way we sew the body of the bag, we're going to sew the sides of the bag as well. Just that this one, we are sewing onto the wrong side, so that the right side is going to be inside. Okay, so edge to edge as well, the same way we sew the body of the bag is the same way we are going to be sewing the lining on it. So put the lining inside the bag. Just put the lining inside the bag. So the right side is what we'll be seeing, the wrong side is facing the wrong side of the bag. Then you fold the edges of the lining. You fold the edges and then you sew it with the bag. So fold the edges of the lining and sew it with the bag. As you're sewing, whenever you get to the edge where the body of the bag is connected to the side of the bag, ensure that the body of the bag is the one on top and it is lying on the side of the bag, okay, so that it can push in the side of your bag. When you sew, you understand what I'm trying to say. When you get to the place where the side is joined to the front or to the back, ensure that the one you're putting on top and you're stitching on is the body of the bag, not the side, so that it pushes in the side. Okay, so fold and then you sew round. You don't need to fold the body of the bag because you've already folded that. Just the lining inside, that's the one you're going to fold and you're going to sew round. Ensure that it is well tucked in. Ensure that as you are sewing, the lining is not showing on the edge, because you don't want people to open their bag and everybody is seeing the lining on the edges. So you just want to make sure it is edge to edge, is equal, or the lining is not even showing at the top. Alright, so we are done sewing and I'm just going to burn all loose and excess threads, and I'm going to fix the zipper. So this is the zipper, and I'm going to fix it and pull it. So I've been able to lock our bag, and I'm going to cover the zipper to stop it with a leather. So you can use a zip stopper, but for this tutorial I'm using a leather. Just sew the leather and then you trim it so it stops the zip and avoids the zipper coming off. So here I'm going to be fixing the chain to the bag. Okay, so fix the chain to the bag, let it go through all the holes, and then you join the chain to each other and then you fix it. And that is all for the bag. So by the time you're done sewing, just straighten out the bag, everything will come off. And here we have our bag. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you would love to learn how to make more designs of bag, I'm glad to announce to you that as opposed to just getting 2 video tutorials when you join our advanced training class, now we're going to be sending you an extra 10 video tutorials that teaches you how to make 10 designs of bag for free. So you're not going to be paying an extra cost, just joining the advanced training, and you're going to be getting 10 extra video tutorials. To learn more about how to get this, kindly use the link in the description below. See you.